Well, hello everyone. Let me check. I have some problems with the audio. Um, Let me check. Okay. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the self-knowledge lectures. I had some issues with the internet connection this week, and so I couldn't stream the Phase A lectures past Wednesday and Friday. I thought I wouldn't be able to stream today's topic live, but luckily the issues were resolved today, so we can continue broadcasting the lectures of the self-knowledge course live. And as every Sunday, we have our Phase B lectures. And today we have a very, very interesting topic. We are going to talk about the 4 kinds of Hannasmusen. Probably that is a new word for you, but today you are going to learn what is this about. And well, actually today's subject is very interesting, but at the same time, it is very important that we reflect on this and that we get to understand it. We must understand the need to define ourselves in our inner work. In that inner work that we are doing, we can see that person here with this like 2 sides. Actually, we all have this, and we need to start defining ourselves. Because when a person begins to do the inner work, he begins to condense his energy. That is what we are teaching here, right? And what happens that he is certainly awakening very powerful forces within himself. And for this reason, we must start defining clearly and definitively to which side we are going to tilt, because maintaining a double center of gravity brings very, very negative consequences that we will study today. So here we see the word Hannasmusen. And well, let's start by explaining what is a Hannasmusen, right? And well, the Hannasmusen, or who is called a Hannasmusen, actually Hannasmusen is the person who has 2 centers of gravity. That is to say, the person who serves 2 masters, the devil and the inner being at the same time. It happens that we all have within us, a percentage of consciousness that is free from the ego. We all have that 3% of free consciousness. And that in us is what is divine, is what is sublime, is what is eternal, is what is immortal. And it is like the divinity in each one of us, right? But we also have a large percentage of ego, or of essence trapped in the ego, which in us is the perverse and the diabolical side. However, once we receive the knowledge and we are beginning to work on condensing and crystallizing the superior forces in us, well, actually, if we don't define ourselves clearly, if we don't focus all of our efforts on achieving a permanent certain center of gravity towards the awakening and towards the development of our consciousness, that other aspect, that negative aspect that we all have, which is our ego, due to this double center of gravity, will end up being fed and finally taken for itself, or better said, it will end up turning those forces and faculties of the consciousness down. So the ego will be the one that is going to start using these faculties, forces, and strength. As long as we don't define ourselves clearly in this work, to go against the psychological I, go against the myself. As long as we continue having those spoiled defects, which we don't want to eliminate, which we don't want to abandon, we will continue, on one hand, making efforts to work on the three factors for the consciousness revolution. We will be like there trying to eliminate our ego, trying to make a wise use of our sexual energy, trying to sacrifice for humanity, right? But what happens that on the other side, or the rest of the time, well, actually most of the time, we continue in this Hannasmusen state by satisfying the ego at the same time, and this problem that we all have is what ends up condemning us to involution, since with having a double center of gravity serving on one hand to the inner being, but on the other hand consciously feeding our psychological defects, we will never ever reach liberation. So we will then see that there are several types of Hannasmusen, since all humanity is Hannasmusen to a greater or lesser degree. And what is important is that we reflect on this and that we come to identify what type of Hannasmusen we are. Actually, in a conscious astral projection, we can get to investigate this. And we are, and also to start working on ourselves, on this Hannasmusen cells that we have, so that we can like get out of there. Because the greater the type of Hannasmusen, the more serious the consequences. So there are 4 types of Hannasmusen. So let's study each one of them. And well, the first type, it's made up of people from this outside world who don't know about esotericism, nor they are like interested in it. These people only have a planetary body. That is, they only have a physical and vital bodies, fully created, right? Because our mother and our father gave us this body, or we can say the Mother Nature gave us these bodies. But they only have an astral, mental, and causal embryo. Because in none of their existences, they have practiced the sexual magic or the sexual transmutation. Therefore, they have not crystallized energy within their spine, never. And such a kind of person just like accumulates in life a dangerous fatal something, which are the very activities of the ego in their psyche. So we see that they have a double center of gravity, because inside they have like that primary divine particle, which is a 3%, which gives them spiritual impulses. And for this, they are seeking in one way or another to look for something to believe in. They seek to go to mass, go to church. In some way, they seek to be good people. But most of their time, they spend it in simply like taking care of their personality and the things of the personality, simply manifesting and nurturing also their different selves, like anger, like envy, like gossip, like laziness, like loss, greed, sadness, jealousy, vices, etc. See, you can see there the double center of gravity, right? And what happens? That at the time of death, the only thing that survives there, that goes from one life to another, is just a bunch of devils that have no value, that is just garbage. Because, when they haven't created anything within themselves, they are all the time just focused on their personality and the things of the personality. And what happens that when one of these people concludes his existence 108, since he didn't work with the transmutation of the sexual energy, they were just all the time fornicating their sexual energy, so they didn't create the vehicles or the existential bodies that could give them presence in the higher dimensions of nature. and nor they didn't work, and nor they work in the three factors for the consciousness revolution to awaken their consciousness. What happened is that when they go to involution, they disintegrate very quickly there in the process of the involution, in the 9 dental circles, or the pass through hell. Because as they never transmuted, they don't have any energy crystallized, so they will like have a quick pass on the involution. When we say a quick pass, we are talking of maybe hundreds of years, but actually compared with the other kinds of Hannasmusen, you're going to see that this is like a quick pass through involution. Well, that is the first type. The second type of Hannasmusen is made up of those who already have an astral body created but didn't die on themselves. In other words, people who in some existence had the knowledge of sex, they practiced sexual magic, and came to create the astral body for their particular use. But they didn't continue the esoteric work. They lacked continuity of purposes because they didn't have like a permanent center of gravity towards the self-realization of their being. Let's remember that we saw in phase A, in the lecture How to Fabricate Soul and Spirit, that as we create the existential bodies, we actually develop forces, faculties, powers. But if we don't have a continuity of purposes in the search for the self-realization, if we don't generate that permanent center of gravity around the practices of consciousness, if we don't decide to radically die on ourselves, to eliminate each of our psychological selves, especially those like sorcerers selves that we all have, like those witches inside us who are fascinated with the use and the development of many faculties. And if we don't take like the firm determination to focus our time, our strength, and our energy on the development of our inner being, then it will be our psychological aggregates who will use these faculties that we are developing, while creating the existential bodies, right? And when these people die, it is very common that in their next existence, they bring certain faculties. That is why you see that there are people who are born and bring like ease to astrally unfold themselves, or to see the aura of other people, or to see people who have passed away, or see spirits, etc. That is because they already have created an astral body in a previous existence. And usually they end up following in that next existence the same path of, the witchcraft and the black magic. And what happens that when their 108 existences conclude, they enter involution. But in their case will be a process much slower because their astral body takes longer to disintegrate. If, for example, as I was saying, Hannasmusen type 1 lasts hundreds of years in the passage through the dental circles, this type of Hannasmusen would take, for example, tens of thousands of years, for example. Now, the third type of Hannasmusen, it is formed by those who have fabricated their 5 solar bodies, the physical, the vital, the astral, the mental, and the causal solar bodies in the first mountain. And they didn't die definitely in themselves, because at the point of the decision of the path in the fifth initiation of major mysteries, they betrayed their inner Christ, taking the path of nirvana. And they came to become real man, because when you get to create those 5 bodies, you are already a real man. But as they went through the nirvanic path, they didn't come to unite with their divine soul. Even though they have a human soul, as they choose the nirvana, they don't have the right to unite to their divine soul, right? And their inner Christ, for that reason, is not born, and they don't have the right to go to the second mountain, where the work of death is done completely. Because in the second mountain is where the Christ, or the Christic force, ends with all the causal selves and with any trace of ego in the person. The path of nirvana, although it promises hundreds or perhaps thousands of years of paradisiacal nirvanic happiness, it is actually going through a false door. Because through this path, one never comes back to the Father. And once the Dharma runs out and the weight of the ego, of the invisible moon of the person, weighs too much, it makes them go down again, having to try again from the very beginning to achieve their self-realization. But commonly making the same mistakes, because when you go down, you lose like the consciousness that you had, and you actually are like any of us. You need to start from the very beginning, and you have the same defects. So for that reason, you are going to make the same mistakes, at least that you revolutionize yourselves. And the last time when they choose that path, when they were trying to make the work for the first time, let's say, they lacked revolution, and they like die selectively. So they have those spoiled psychological selves that they don't want to abandon, and they have many attachments that they don't want to abandon, and also they lack love, because they sacrifice little for humanity. Being able to do more for humanity, they don't, and for that reason, they go like there to that point, and they end up choosing the path of the nirvana because they lack revolution. And if they manage to reach that point of choosing path again, by recurrence, they end up taking the path of the nirvana again. So in this case, the involutionary process, if they run out of their 108 existences, is still much slower. And they haven't, if for example, you can say from the second type could last like tens of thousands of years. In the case of the nirvana, they will take probably hundreds of thousands of years in that process of involution, because now those 5 bodies, or all that energy that was condensed, needs to be disintegrated in that process, so that the essence can go out like pure, like the same as when it started. That is the process. And they have no choice but to eliminate what they have of Hannasmusen by dissolving the ego voluntarily, or definitely, devolving within the bowels of earth in involution, in the 9 dental circles. And they are like practically lost cases. They say abortions of the cosmic mother. So if when we do this research in the astral on the type of Hannasmusen that we are, if it turns out that we are nirvanas, for example, we know now that we have to revolutionize ourselves, that we need to work hard on our attachments, and especially to the attachment to our psychological defects, and decide to radically die on ourselves and place ourselves that like north, that is to achieve the intimate self-realization of our being. And well, that is the third type. Now, there is the fourth type, which is made up of the fallen thrones, of the bodhisattvas. who are gods who drop themselves. That is when a master, someone who has already achieved self-realization, that is someone who already climbed the three mountains of initiation, created all his bodies, their solar bodies, their gold bodies, and their light bodies, and therefore he passes from being just a humanoid, like we are now, to being a real man, then a superman in the second mountain, and then finally became an absolute man. So he did the whole path. And therefore he reached a esoteric hierarchy. And there, at that point, he decides to throw the stone into the water. That is how it is esoterically called, which is to dissolve all his bodies. That is to say, he decides to go back down to the physical manifestation in order to go down twice as much as the previous time, to create twice as much ego, and with this they become true demons, right? But what happens that from there they will have the opportunity to get twice as much wisdom and twice as much love to achieve a higher hierarchy or hierarchical level. And for that reason, he will be able to serve the universe, the humanities, in a broader way and in a more conscious way. For example, a self-realized being of a certain hierarchy can be like the regent of a planet of a solar system. But a self-realized being of a higher hierarchy may be the regent of a sun of a solar system. So he can rule the whole solar system. And one of an even higher hierarchy can be the ruler of the central sun of a galaxy. And he will be in charge of the direction of the entire galaxy and its solar systems. That should give you like an idea of what is this of falling and self-realizing again. There are masters of very high hierarchies, and that is why they can fulfill very important missions. For example, it is said that the Master Jesus, Jesus the Christ, is a master of a seventh race. That is to say that he has self-realized 7 times. And that is the reason why he is a master of a great hierarchy. And actually, this process is something that 100% conscious being decide at will. This is not like an accident, They are usually called bodhisattvas or bodhisattvas because they renounce the joy of the absolute for love of humanities in order to serve better. And when they go down, they are titled fallen throne because they disappear from their throne, and then the double personality is fabricated, that of the angel and that of the demon, as you can see. And well, they are losing and turning down in successive existences through the fornication everything that they had achieved. So that people usually have these recurrent dreams in which they see things falling from the sky, like planes or how you say a spaceship, for example, or like being warriors losing their the parts of their armor, for example, a golden armor, for example. And well, that is what happened with them. That is a process that takes like several existences. They end up becoming real demons. And they are usually people who show a lot of strength and intelligence. It is very common that in many existences they are remarkable beings in history, like leaders in history or great scientists or great dictators type I don't know, what is the name of the guy of the Nazi one, Adolf Hitler, for example, died. And they usually have a lot of power in the verb due to the condensed energy that they have. And what happens? That they, in this process, lose their consciousness about themselves. So actually, any of us can be Hannasmusen of any of these types. The important thing is that we get to make that research in the astral projection, so we know exactly what is the danger. I mean, like what can be the consequences that we can get if we don't get to define ourselves. And what happens that when these people receive the knowledge and begin to work on themselves and begin to eliminate what they created as a demon in themselves, they usually manifest a lot of strength for inner work, you know. But they are also at the same time like very arrogant, like very pride, and that usually leads them to be to be rebel against their own inner being. And then they develop like a serious double center of gravity, and this stagnates them in the path, being able to run out of their 108 existences without getting up again, without rising again. And those who we know as great demons, any of those demons that you know as you don't know, well, there are many, actually were great beings of high hierarchy who, when they are fallen, they drag humanities to the abyss with them. But when they resolve to get up, you know, to rise again, they actually do great works of sacrifice for humanity, and they help many people to also rise. And it is clear that if they don't resolve to dissolve what they have from Hannasmusen, they will also have to devolve within the bowels of the planet Earth as Moloch, which is one of those demons that is in this moment in the evolution process, and many others are doing. So actually, as I was explaining at the beginning, what is important and what this lecture invites us to is that we start studying and identifying those details of Hannasmusen that we have, that lack of definition, that double center of gravity, and that we dedicate to radically dive in ourselves, to practice the psychological death. You know, let's observe that that is like the main problem with the Hannasmusen, that they don't die in themselves. And we need to start seeing this Hannasmusen self in how sometimes we have the courage to practice the psychological death, to meditate, to transmute our sexual energy, to sacrifice ourselves for humanity, bringing, you know, this knowledge to others. But on the other hand, we don't like get the will to get out of the fascination with the things of the personality. We need to see how we remain like attached to our pleasures and above all to our sufferings, how we don't want to abandon them, how we don't decide to achieve the perfect chastity, but rather we continue like justifying our constant sexual faults or our constant nocturnal emissions, etc. And this is how the Hannasmusen develops and thickens in us. And we can come to light the sacred fire, but without deciding to eliminate the ego, this will end sooner or later, causing that this force, that this energy that we are condensing in our spine, and all the faculties and forces that we are developing will end up like falling. And we like end up falling also headlong into the involution for this reason. So actually, that is the invitation of today's topic, and this has been the information for today's lecture. I just hope that this help you to reflect and that give us the encourage to seek to start generating a continuity of purpose that leads you to develop a permanent center of gravity around the intimate self-realization of your being, whatever it takes, because that is like the purpose and that would be like our direction, you know. And well, I will invite you to our next Phase B lecture next Sunday, in which we are going to be talking about the three types of Tantrism. And there we are going to learn about the three types of sexuality that exist. And we will see why the great battle between the white magicians and black magicians has its roots in sex. Yeah. And well, this has been all for today. Let me check if you have any question or comment in today's lecture so we solve it. And let me see here. Well, I want to say hi to Angelica and to Christina who are here. And here we have a question from Angelica. What are the most common types of Hannasmusen here among us? I've always wondered. Well, actually, in this precise moment, there are a lot of demons trying to make their path again. But actually, the great majority of humanity is Hannasmusen type 1 because they don't like things about esotericism and nothing to do with that. But yes, there are many others who are, well, I cannot say like we have more of this, but actually what I know is that in this point there are a lot of demons like trying to make it is because of the vibratory level that we are handling now as humanity, you know, as we are in this point, in the end of this race, and the perversion and the degeneration is you see something great. Now, this type of psychologists, the psychologists of the of demons, can like they feel like normal, you know, like right now. And for that reason, there are many of them. The important thing is that we get to know what type of Hannasmusen we are, and we get out. If we are one, we know that what we need to do or to focus is to get out of the fascination with the things of the personality and start like making this permanent center of gravity that lead us to self-realization. If we are type 2, we need to work a lot on those selves of the witchcraft or all those desires of development faculties and etc., because that will make us to go and create again a solar, or to regenerate the astral body that we have already created, and to go again and commit the same mistake, you know, feeling those faculties within us and turning them to the ego, becoming sorcerers, healers, tarot readers, etc. And if we are a third type 3, if we are nirvanas, then we know that we need to revolutionize ourselves, to know or to understand that the path is taken, is like the work is taking the direct path. We need to make that Christ to be born in us and to achieve the self-realization. And if we are the type 4, well, we need to work a lot on that, like strong, it's hard for me to explain that in English, but it's like arrogance against the being, or the pride against our inner God, you know, because that is like the main issue of this type of Hannasmusen, and to focus all that strength that they naturally have to the self-realization of the being. And let me see what Christina is asking here. Advanced black magicians are considered the 4th type of Hannasmusen? Yes, because you cannot have that amount of power in verse in the evil if you don't have condensed energy in yourself. You don't have that power to manipulate others through your verb if you haven't created those bodies, if you haven't condensed before all that energy. That is what gives you the strength in the verb. A white magician, use that power, you use all those strength to help people to go up. And when that same power is like, how can I say, like upwards, downwards, then they use it to manipulate people to have more powers, to get more material things, to be, as I was saying, dictators, etc. So yes, it is like that. And well, those are the questions that that we have for today's lecture. If you see this video and you have any question, you can leave your questions there. All the time I checking the page to see and to resolve any question that you have. Or you can send me a direct message through the messenger of the page, and I will also be helping you with any concern that you have regarding this self-knowledge course. Remember that on Sundays we see the Phase B lectures, and the Phase A lectures we see them Wednesdays and Fridays. And actually, it is like important to previously watch the Phase A lectures so we can better understand these Phase B topics, right? So thank you very much to all of you, and well, see you the next time. Ciao, ciao.